Okay, well, maybe we'll get started. On behalf of the Department of Educational Leadership at Fresno State, I'd like to welcome you to this breakout session. And it is entitled Considerations for Hiring and Supporting Hard-to-Fill Positions. And my name is Dr. Susan Trace, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction in Research Methods. And I'm a core member of the doctoral program in educational leadership at Fresno State. And before we begin, I'd like to take just a minute and ask you if that you have a strong connection and you can set aside any potential distractions. In addition to turning off the ringer on your phone, you might want to turn off any other Wi-Fi connections on your phone, your iPad, or other devices. That'll help your bandwidth. Also note that this is a live session and it's being recorded. And we've muted the mic for all participants. So if you have any questions or comments, please direct them to me using the chat function. And then I will ask these questions once the presenters are finished. So again, I want to thank you for attending this session. And I want to introduce the presenters here. We have two presenters. Carrie Carter will be talking about special education teacher retention, and Corrine Folmer will be talking about an exploration of hiring processes of novice teachers. So we're going to start with Carrie.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Dr. Trace.
Welcome.
As Dr. Trace referenced, my dissertation topic is special education teacher retention. And to start with my background, it's important to know that I don't have a background in special education. My background is that of a general education teacher and administrator. As a former elementary principal, I experienced the shortage of special education teachers while trying to fill vacant positions. This was not the same experience that I had when I was trying to fill general education positions in which a job posting would produce many qualified applicants. And then also in my current role serving as director of special education, I continue to experience the shortage of special education teachers. More than 1 out of 5 special education teachers in California left the profession between 2015 and 2017. 60% of first-year special education teachers were working without the proper credential, and high turnover costs districts up to $20,000 for every teacher who leaves because of the investment that districts place in professional development and training, preparing these teachers that they hire. Teacher attrition impacts student achievement and led to lower student scores in both ELA and math. And our most vulnerable students, those with disabilities, are often being taught by the least qualified teachers. Some of the contributing factors to teachers leaving include underprepared teachers, those who are not fully credentialed. And evidence supports that teachers have the most significant school-based impact on student outcomes. Our teachers are the ones that make those connections and relationships with their students. So we've got to figure out a way to retain our special education teachers. Building on that foundation of the problem statement, these themes emerge specifically in the literature. And I'd like to focus your attention on these themes that I found to be in common with the research of teacher retention and attrition. They include teacher preparation. With attrition, it includes demands of the jobs, which are paperwork, long hours, no lunch break, and legal stress. And then with retention, the evidence to lead to support from an administrator, a colleague, a mentor, and through way of professional development. In conducting research, I found it interesting that these themes have been identified as critical problems for over 20 years, and they remain a critical problem. So it's important to understand why school districts continue to struggle with retention of special education teachers. Phenomenology offers both a theoretical and methodological framework, and it provides the researcher the lens to focus on the essence of the experiences of participants and really get to the meaning of them. And this is a good fit for me. I love listening to the stories of individuals. I genuinely want to help people, and phenomenology offered that through this research. The purpose of this study is to better understand the experiences of special education teachers in Blue Water School District within their first 3 years of teaching. And the research question driving are, what are the experiences of special education teachers in BWSD within those first 3 years of teaching? This study contributes to the literature by identifying practices school sites and districts can use to better support special education teachers in those first few years and beyond, and therefore reduce attrition rates. And by improving the rate of special education teacher retention, the academic achievement of students with disabilities will also improve. And this is done by examining research factors that contribute to special education teachers leaving, as well as research-based strategies and practices that led to teacher retention. And it's also a possible cost and time savings to districts. So this phenomenological study was to better understand the lived experiences of special education teachers. And there was a purposeful sampling of special education teachers within BWSD. And this purposeful sampling included participants across special education programs, 4 different program types, including RSP, which is that Resource Specialist Program, autism programs, functional life skills, which are our students in self-contained classes, and our intervention programs, which include students who have been diagnosed with emotional disturbance. And this really ensures both diverse and information-rich data. There was 12 participants in this study, including teachers in their second year, teachers with 3 to 5 years of experience, and teachers with 6 to 8 years of experience. In-depth interviews, as well as this was a powerful way to gain insight into educational issues through understanding the experiences of those who are actually living through those experiences. Potential risks in this study include possible identification of the school district and or of the participants, and really recalling just difficult feelings or emotions through those in-depth prolonged interviews. Therefore, pseudonyms were used and trust building in the interview process with the time of day taken into consideration as well. And then potential benefits include identifying strategies that can lead to teacher retention, as well as teachers feeling valued and heard in somebody taking time to listen to their stories. So as we look at the participant breakdown, I want to draw your attention to first the group in yellow. These are our teachers who were hired on an emergency credential, which would be a PIP or a STIP. So the requirements for a preliminary education specialist credential are temporarily waived because these individuals did not meet those full requirements yet. So these are individuals with a bachelor's degree and have passed the CBEST. So these teachers include participants from intervention programs, functional life skills, and autism programs. I've got the years that they've been teaching, as well as the last column on the right. They have experience as a paraprofessional prior to being hired, and we can see that all of these individuals did. Next, in aqua color, we've got teachers who are hired on an intern credential. So they have the coursework, they just needed that student teaching experience, and they were both paraprofessionals prior. And this last group, these are 4 participants who were hired with a preliminary credential. It's interesting to note that 3 of those 4 were all in the same program type, being our RSP teachers, and all but 1 had never had that experience of being a paraprofessional first. In-depth interviews with semi-structured protocols allowed participants' voices to be privileged in the data collection process, which was important for me for this phenomenological study. 3-part interview process with open-ended questions were conducted, and interview questions were piloted prior. The interviews were audio recorded and transcribed with participant consent, and reflective memos and highlights from previous interviews were shared at the beginning of each interview, inviting participants to make revisions before continuing and to prevent potential bias from the researcher. As I also have an experience as a first-year teacher, and I didn't want my experience to carry into theirs. And it was also a great way for me to collaborate with the participants. And the 3-part interview process spanning over 3 months to build trust and create relationships where participants felt comfortable sharing their experience. Data from the in-depth interviews were examined to identify trends and themes, and member checking, which is the process that I referenced on the previous slide of sharing my reflective memos and those analytic memos with them at the beginning of each one, and inviting them to make any revisions. With the thematic analysis, included open coding to identify meaningful chunks of data, and those meaningful chunks were merged into categories, and themes emerged from those categories. The limitations to the study is that this is a perspective from teachers in one school district and should not be generalized. Also, Zoom and not in-person interviews may have prevented participants from really sharing deeply. The researcher conducted 3 interview process to allow participants to get to know me first and feel more comfortable. Also, my presence in the interviews may have resulted in them not sharing honestly, because I had a dual role in this study, that of the researcher, but also the boss, because I am the director of special education in this district of the study. The interview protocol and the in-depth 3 interview process may have helped with this. Also, the time of year may have potentially biased results. We know that October, November are very stressful times of year for teachers. And then the COVID-19 pandemic, I can't help but wonder if this may have impacted or influenced the experience of the participants. But this is the good part, talking about the findings. So interview 1 really focused on those experiences prior to teaching that really were identified by participants as being beneficial in preparing them to be a special education teacher, and also allowing them experiences to draw from as a novice teacher when they didn't know what to do. So these are the experiences that they identified. 9 out of 12 of the participants had an experience as a paraprofessional. 5 were substitute teachers prior. 4 were student teachers. 6 were athletic coaches that they shared, they drew from that experience, and how to talk to parents, how to give feedback that led to change. And we also had 6 who referenced other life experiences, such as traumatic experiences that really allowed them to relate to students. These experiences, again, really better prepared them and allowed them to draw on when they didn't know what to do. And this is significant for administrators and teacher preparation programs. How do we provide these experiences for future teachers? Staying true to phenomenology, I recognize the value in voices of my participants, so I'm going to be sharing quotes throughout. This is from Evelyn, who's an autism teacher with 7 years of experience and hired with a preliminary credential. And she did have experience as a paraprofessional. She is unique in this study because she is the only one who not only had student teaching experience, as well as a mentor through the induction program, and had experience as a paraprofessional. When she reflected on those experiences prior to being hired as a teacher that helped her, she said, I don't understand how anyone can be a special ed teacher without being a paraprofessional first. I have no idea how you would know what a visual schedule is, how you would know how to collect data, how you would even know the small things about when you're going to lunch, make sure there's a paraprofessional behind them to help. There are so many things. I don't know how anyone could ever be a special ed teacher without being a paraprofessional first. When I was in my first year of teaching, all I did was pull everything from when I was a paraprofessional. Although Evelyn had experiences from student teaching, having a mentor, it was the experience of being a paraprofessional that she reflected on drawing the most. And what came from interview 1 from all the participants is evidence to support that we must build the capacity of our teachers by building their toolkits and providing experiences that help to prepare them to work with students with disabilities. The challenges that were identified by participants, this is when they really reflected from interview 2, they reflected on those first 3 years of teaching and identified challenges that they encountered as a new teacher. All 12 participants identified the long hours. And really, if you look at these challenges, those are the demands of the job that also emerged in the literature from chapter 2. When Evelyn reflected on the challenges, she said, I would come in early so like I could set everything up. I didn't get a lunch at all my first year. I had a student with such bad behaviors that he couldn't leave the classroom, so I couldn't leave the classroom at all. He didn't go to recess. He couldn't go to the cafeteria for lunch, so I had to spend my entire day in the class. It was really rough. And then I would always stay late until 5 or 6, then go home and have dinner, and I would just keep pressing on. I would prep more, and I would literally prep until I fell asleep. This is significant really for those who support new teachers in recognizing that the long hours without a lunch can lead to teacher burnout and attrition if it's not addressed. I'm also going to draw your attention to paperwork. 9 participants identified the amount of paperwork required as a challenge, noting that the case management side of being a special education teacher is another full-time job in itself. As Isabella reflected on this, the demands of the paperwork involved, she said, you go into special education because you love and care about this population. And unfortunately, your energy and your time are not spent with the population. It's spent with the legalities and the paperwork. The teaching piece slips. We give that to our paraprofessionals who are not as qualified, who are not credentialed, and not as experienced. I think we do our kids a disservice. Several participants shared similar thoughts and wrestled with what some refer to as an ethical dilemma of spending more time on paperwork than providing instruction for their students.
You have about 2 minutes left.
Thank you. Also, what came from the second interview was I was really able to dive in and say, what are those specific supports, the type of support that supported you, that helped you? We've got colleagues. This is reflected in red on here. Collaboration, encouragement, guidance, resources, social, emotional, and time. These participants identified that they went to a colleague the most for social, emotional support. Isabella said, I would say support for me was emotional first and then practical second, like understanding the job, but like caring about my mental health. We know that the demands placed on special education teachers is emotionally exhausting. The second one I'm going to highlight for this presentation is that from an administrator, and that's reflected in blue. And we can see that participants identified the support from an administrator being that of just their time. They just want time from their administrator. So the summary and discussions, these stories of the teachers illuminated the essence of the phenomenon and allowed me to really better understand their lived experiences. What came out of the third interview was really reflecting on those making meaning of all of this together. And what really emerged to me there were character traits that were consistent with them. As they talked about the challenges of being a special education teacher, their drive, determination, compassion, purpose, serving others, grit, and perseverance, all were reflected and illuminated in their stories. A fourth of the participants, when they were asked why they chose to stay in the profession, they reflected on the number of interviews required in this district and the time that it takes administrators to find people who genuinely care about kids. And so these are some quotes from participants as they talked about why they stayed. We're fortunate that in our district, everyone's in it for the right reasons. And I think BWSD does a good job screening for that. Participants did not explicitly discuss the hiring practices, but as I reviewed my reflective and analytical memos, the participants' implicit references to hiring practices and individual character traits were salient.
Thank you. Are you finishing up here?
I will end with a quote. And this teacher said, I love my job. It's just the best. There's hard days and long hours, but it's worth it. There's no better kids on campus than our special education kids. They are incredible little humans, and the challenges they deal with every day are inspiring. The paperwork and other challenges are one piece, but look at the big picture and that the things you do aren't just for nothing. It's making a difference in students' lives, and you're pushing them to be successful in life. I know they'll do great things. I wake up excited to come to work, and I spend hours writing IEPs and doing all of the work for them, and it's worth it.
Thank you so much, Carrie. That was really an inspirational and a very insightful presentation. So now we're going to turn it over. We don't have any, oh, there's one question in the chat. Let's look at that real quickly. Just a congratulations. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Corrine now.
Great, thank you. And Carrie, I loved right at the end, you kind of led into hiring processes. And that is what I'm excited to share with all of you today is my exploration of hiring processes with novice teachers and how that informs the retention for them. Oh, that didn't work. So a little bit of background, there are really three broad understandings that inform my research and led me. First, my interest as an administrator and how we retain novice teachers. And secondly, my research to inform best practices and hiring processes for districts. So there is a teacher shortage, and I won't go into too much of this because Carrie highlighted that within special education, but it is something we see across other subject matters as well. And that this shortage is often in research documented as a cause of teacher attrition. Retention of novice teachers is critical to the fiscal and educational stability of a district. The rates of turnover have been estimated to range in cost from $2.2 billion to $7 billion annually for districts across the United States. In addition, a particular concern to this attrition is the lack of retention, which really does result in diminished teacher quality over time, which negatively impacts student achievement as determined by research. And hiring processes as a method to inform teacher commitment and organizational fit has been researched only minimally. There's very little research out there with regards to the educational field and hiring processes. This highlights a little bit of the statement of the problem, which we've just talked about with the background, is that teacher retention has been the center of research for decades and still remains a problem. Specifically, the retention of novice teachers. And for my research, novice teachers were defined as teachers with 5 years or less experience, which was highlighted by the National Educational Statistics Center. There's limited research that explores hiring processes in districts and how they lead to the recruitment and hiring and support of novice teachers. And truly, research has found that districts can potentially address staffing challenges by exploring how hiring processes fit within the human resource strategy of the district and retention. So the purpose of this study was really to add to the limited amount of research in hiring. It explored what role hiring processes play in the retention of novice teachers, explored the perceptions of the hiring processes from 3 different participant groups, and added to the limited research. The questions that drove my research were these 2. What role does the hiring process play in novice teacher retention? And what are the perceptions of the hiring process by the novice teacher, the principal, and a human resources administrator of a district? These questions are centered in the theoretical framework I'll cover of human capital theory and human resource management. To build background for my research and to ensure that my research was founded in previous literature, the topics that were explored in the literature review were teacher shortage, teacher attrition, teacher retention, hiring processes, and hiring teachers. And the research that's previously been done really did surface in the findings of this particular research study, which I'll illuminate a little bit I'll highlight a little bit later here in the presentation. As I mentioned, this research was founded in human capital theory. And human capital theory holds tight to the premise that economic benefits for individuals and society stem from the investment in people within the organization. And born out of human capital theory comes human resource management. This is based on the belief that if an organization's greatest asset is its humans, which is human capital theory, that these humans and this greatest asset needs to be managed. And that's where human resource management was founded. Some driving studies to my research were these 3. Shifting hiring decisions to the school level does not ensure an information-rich hiring process occurs as determined in the study by Liu and Johnson. Equally, understanding the perceptions of principals when making hiring decisions is important in informing how hiring processes inform their teacher selection. And then the research around accurate job previews, which is part of the hiring process, have been shown to predict higher levels of person organization and person job fit, which result in an increased level of teacher satisfaction. So this study was conducted in a large suburban school district in the Central Valley of California. It's important to note that this district also has a decentralized hiring process, and that process was described where individual school sites will hold their own interview panels, and then the principal will make a candidate selection, and that candidate will then progress through different levels at the district level administration, but it is essentially a decentralized hiring process. My study did extend a study on retention of novice teachers that was conducted in 2011 within the same district. And a collective case study approach was applied as the founding methodology for this study. And a collective case study was chosen specifically because it allows the researcher to focus on one issue through multiple perspectives gathered from multiple cases. Equally, a collective case study design allows the researcher to define the predetermined scope that binds the study. In my research, this collective case study was bound by a single district's hiring process with a focus on novice teachers through the hiring. A purposeful maximal sampling technique was used to maximize the difference in age of students taught, student demographics in the school, years of experience, age of the participant, and gender of the participant, as well as ethnicity. The sample size was as follows: 7 novice teachers participated, 4 principals, and 1 human resources administrator. And the collective case study did involve in-person interviews. The instrumentation used was those individual semi-structured open-ended interviews. Interviews ranged between 20 and 40 minutes, and questions were dependent on the participant's role in the hiring process. And the interviews, as you can see, they're really sought to explore hiring process in general, the varied participant perceptions, understanding and goals of the hiring process within the district, and any connection that the hiring process has with a novice teacher's willingness to remain in the study and within the field. So I found it in my data analysis. I modeled after the data analysis spiral outlined by Cresswell and Poth. Data was organized and prepared for analysis following transcription, and member checking was implemented to determine reliability in answers. Transcripts were loaded and read and reviewed in vivo. An inductive analysis was implemented, and that involved an open coding technique to develop initial codes. Through the coding and categorical aggregation, which you see next, common themes were established. And that was also done through a within case analysis, which was completed for each case and led to identifying common themes within each participant group. And then a thematical analysis was completed across all cases, or what is known as a cross-case analysis was then completed. I maintained a reflexive journal to examine any biases I brought to the study. And Yin asserts that a researcher who implements a reflexive journal are better able to reflect on possible biases, which could influence the interpretation of data. And then finally, themes and findings were defined. And that is what I'm actually most excited to share with you. So you can see here on the right, you can see, right are the themes that emerged. There were 6. You can see the codes, how they were led to categories that then led to the themes established in this study. I'll highlight these a little bit more in depth individually as I go over. So within the research findings for research question 1, which was what role does the hiring process play in novice teacher retention, there were 3 key findings. One was that the hiring process allows alignment of culture and values between both the novice teacher, the school site, and the district. And so we found that the hiring process supports the retention of novice teachers. It allows for this alignment. You can see some quotes here. A teacher said, "I got a love of students from the interviews." That's what they learned about the particular site and district that they interviewed with. And as well, another teacher stated, "I learned about the school district. I love the part that the school district, it has high standards and that it's very cohesive and it has a way about the district, and I appreciate that." The second theme that emerged was a level of connection. So for novice teachers, one of the most important aspects of retention is related to the level of connection the novice teacher feels with the staff, site administration, and the community. One teacher stated within their interview, "So my school site, amazing connected. It's the reason I'm not leaving anywhere else." And this was found amongst all novice teacher participants with regards to the level of connection established in the hiring process that kept them in the district. And the third finding with how the hiring process plays a role in novice teacher retention was the perceived fit of a novice teacher to the job, the school site. And it was important for all participants in supporting the retention of novice teachers. One principal stated that throughout the hiring process, it was used as a tool, is what they are trying to get a sense of is who this individual is as a person, and are they going to really fit our team and meet the needs of our team? And that fit was equally echoed in the participant group of novice teachers who indicated that they applied at specific positions and sites, or continued in the hiring process for the job because they viewed it was a great fit for them. With research question 2, what are the perceptions of the hiring process of novice teachers, the principal and human resource administrator? These findings were interesting. There were some unexpected findings that I found. The most prevalent was information sharing. All participants believe the hiring process should have a rich amount of information shared. However, the district's perspective of the information-rich hiring process contrasted with that of the novice teacher perspective, that there was a lack of information in the hiring process. And you can see how these were captured in these 2 quotes. The only thing I would say that I felt unprepared with some of the day-to-day logistics, which is what teachers, novice teachers, wanted to learn in the hiring process, where a principal felt that it was really important to share as much information as possible with the candidate that you're hiring, at least even with anybody you're potentially hiring. The principal stated that they want the candidate to be aware of what they're signing up for, whether it's the demographics, test scores, and values of the district. So this contrast in the level of information shared within this district is really foundational to some other findings we've had in research. Additionally, one of the findings in the perceptual data was school site autonomy. This aligns with decentralized processes. The hiring process of the district, which allowed for site autonomy, creates a sense of accountability and responsibility in the school and district administrators. So this really came out in that the school's culture, what fit for a school happened, was highlighted in that decentralized process known by these participants as school site autonomy. And the last key finding, which is one that's quite obvious, but I honestly was surprised how prevalent it was in the perceptions, was what an emotional experience the hiring process is for novice teachers. And you can see this is a word cloud from the actual coding data that came out, and you can see how prevalent. And that novice teachers not only express that this is emotionally laden experience for them, but that the purpose and process was not always easily understood by them, the novice teacher. So you see emotions from nerve-wracking, unnerving, overwhelming, to things such as excited, comfortable, relieved, a wide range of emotions that are experienced through the hiring process. The findings that I had in these themes, you can see I wanted to do a quick table to link these to the previous literature. So culture and values is found in equally in previous research in around organizational socialization and high expectations and positive school climate. As well, I think level of connection aligned well in the research with job embeddedness. And research that Engel and Finch found with hiring and the level of connection that kind of echoed in Carrie's, the previous experience with a district and their retention and level of connection they felt even before they retained a teaching position. So I won't spend, for purpose of time, too much on this, but wanted to share with you where you can find some of these themes echoed in previous research and in the literature. Most importantly, as I shared, this research was important to me because I'm very curious as an administrator who believes hiring is one of the most important things we do. How does this inform practice? And truly, hiring processes for novice teachers should share about the culture and values of the district. Based on the findings from this study, it should help determine employee fit. The hiring process really should begin to foster connections. As we saw, the level of connection informs retention for novice teachers, and that hiring process is a great place to begin. It really should share rich information with the novice teacher and find ways to alleviate stress and anxiety where possible. So specifically for district hiring processes, districts should look to move toward a more decentralized process. They really should provide opportunities for teaching candidates to engage with the staff prior to finalizing the hiring. This would have addressed the difference in information shared. That we saw the discrepancies between the district and the novice teachers. And really, the hiring process should facilitate meetings with site and district level administration to help build that level of connection that clarifies culture and values, as well as begins to further the level of connection novice teachers felt and the fit with the district and the school site. There were some limitations to my study. One is obviously this study is limited to a single district, and I think it's important to note that the single district does not have a collective bargaining unit, which may have made the site autonomy and decentralized hiring processes unique. They may have been able to ask different questions that weren't predetermined in the collective bargaining unit. There were external factors. I must acknowledge that my study was conducted during a worldwide pandemic, COVID-19, where labor markets and novice teachers who may have felt more readily connected to their sites or more readily willing to stay within the field because of the uncertainty of job markets out there with COVID-19. The research, my positionality, I'm a researcher who has served as a school site administrator and has participated in a lot of hiring. And I view hiring as being very important. And so that reflexive journal that was implemented throughout my study is really important, but I must acknowledge that I bring a sense of value and importance to hiring, and that was a subject matter in which I was studying. And then equally, the researcher, I worked within the organization that I studied, and that had to be addressed throughout the interviews, and definitely is a limitation of the study. With regards to recommendations for future research, I really think that while I found my findings really echoed some of what has been found in the research, but provide some real practical experiences, I think it would be important for future research to explore hiring processes in districts that have centralized hiring processes. And we know that those districts do that to try and provide equity in hires across the schools within their district. This is often centralized hiring processes are often observed in urban areas. And so I'd be very curious to see how this study would play out in those settings. I also think that equally exploring hiring processes in districts with collective bargaining unit would be interesting to see the contrasts or similarities amongst the studies as we work to inform practices and policies around hiring that help us retain teachers for a longer stint. And equally, I think that this research could be expanded beyond the subgroup I identified, which was novice teachers, to include all teacher hires, those that move amongst districts later in their career. So for that, I'd just like to say thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions and appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, Corrine. That was a great presentation. There's a couple little things I'd like to remind you about. There is, if you look in the chat, there is an attendance help center, and you can, my chat won't open now for some reason. But anyway, you can go in there and look at some extra resources. I'd like to take just a minute, if any of you want to put your screen back on, so that I'm going to try and take a picture here before we go to the question and answer, before people leave. Okay, I think everyone is on here. So 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, I'd like to open it up for questions and answers. If you want to let me look at the chat and see if there's any questions here. Let's see. We've got a couple thank yous here. Thank you, Corrine. You have some great findings, make a difference in hiring practices to ignite change. Also, thank you everyone for the support and community. Any questions?
I wanted to ask Carrie, because I know she had to go through the recommendations sort of quickly. As you think about your recommendations, what landed with you as the overarching one for us as leaders working with that group of teachers?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Dr. Walsh. I apologize that I spent too much time earlier in the slides. Really, I think the recommendations for policy would be around credential requirements for general education teachers and administrators in courses related to just an overview of special education, so that they can really support all students on the campus, not just knowing the details of general education students. And then for practice, really I was surprised by the number of recommendations from participants that had limited fiscal impact. The things that they were asking for, I can implement next school year. There's already plans, things that are already underway. And so that really was what was afforded by doing the in-depth interviews, was asking follow-up questions and diving deeper. And so I was surprised by how many things had very limited fiscal impact. So that was great.
Interesting. Interesting. Any other questions? Okay, once more, I'd like to remind you to check out the Attendee Help and Resource Center. There's a link for it in the chat. I think there's a survey in there for you to fill out. Give us some feedback, which we'd really appreciate. I want to thank you, Nicole, for being here. She's done a tremendous job in organizing this conference. I want to thank our presenters, Carrie and Corrine. You're really just very impactful research. I hope this gets out into the districts. I hope you publish and disseminate your findings, because I think they can have a real impact on practitioners in the field. Very, very important work, so thank you. Any
Thank
last
you all.
questions? Mhm. I didn't mean to cut whoever off. I'm not sure who started talking.
Oh, no, I just said thank you all. It was great to present. Appreciate it.
Okay, so I want to remind you that there's some lunch sessions and also one more session later on today at 1:45. So it was great to be with you, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.